Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Question Box, episode 6 for Friday, the 13th of August. Ooh, spooky. The Question Box is your weekly gaming talk show where we bring into question only the most important gaming news, topics, and trends every week. I'm joined by one good friend from the Australian and New Zealand games industry, and this week I have the distinct pleasure of bringing on editor from Player 2 and a guy I've wanted to talk to about games for a very long time. It's Paul James.
You're pumping me up far too much, but thanks for coming on. It's really cool. I've been looking forward to it since the first time you kind of floated the idea and suggested I come aboard. It's been high on the to-do list and we've managed to make it work.
I know, finally. No, thanks for taking the time, man. For those who are living under a rock and don't know who you are and what you do, educate them.
Oh, I'm going to sell and pitch myself, huh? So as you said, I'm part of the editorial team at player2.net.au. So one of, I think, only 5 or I think 6 now that Well Played's joined. Zach, I'll give you a shout out, mate. Metacritic accredited websites coming out of the region, which is a really cool little thing. Just to say, like, kind of like that.
Definitely.
But so that's been great. I've been writing there. This week actually marked my 6th year at Player 2. So that time's really flown. And so I do obviously a lot of review writing stuff there. A little bit less of that in recent years because I've kind of lent more so into podcasts and YouTube and those sorts of things. So I've got a few different shows that I host. Patched, which is our kind of weekly games podcast, just focusing on a topic at the time, whatever that happens to be. Dev Diary, which is kind of my real baby these days. That's a one-on-one interview series with game developers from around the globe, just kind of sharing the journey so far. Trying not to slide into the spiel mode there and actually start quoting my intro. It's a bad habit. And then just other sort of bits and pieces along the way as well, like jumping in with other people in their podcasts and shows whenever opportunities pop up, much like this one. So
great to hear. Yeah, I've only recently discovered Dev Diary and can vouch. It is a fantastic show, and I will be going back and listening to a bunch of your older episodes as well, because yeah, those stories are absolutely fascinating. Just great to put a spotlight on talent that aren't the Hideo Kojimas, Shigeru Miyamoto's, Cliff Blazinski's of the world, if he's still relevant at all. Showing my age there.
I'm going to hit up Cliff at some point. Don't worry.
Oh, good. Yes, I'll tune in for that one.
We'll see what happens.
Who's your dream? Name like 5 dream guests for that,
5
for that podcast.
This might be some of my PlayStation bias showing. So there's one that I've been it's been a little bit tongue-in-cheek all year, but I desperately love to make it happen. I've created this wanted poster for Corey Barlog. So I might find the
I admire the effort
like that and share it with you later. But like I've dead set created a wanted poster with Corey Barlog's face on it and the whole thing about getting him on Dev Diary. So not dead or alive because obviously the dead thing doesn't help me too much.
Buddy, thanks for the follow. How are you?
But yeah, Corey Barlog would be great. Amy Hennig, just for all her years in writing there, from Legacy of Kain to Uncharted, all that'd be fantastic. But beyond that, I don't know. Like it's one of the things that I've really enjoyed the most about the whole process has been the fact that I'm just discovering a lot of people in the process as people get recommended to me or something like that. And then I start to do a little bit of research, a lot of trawling through LinkedIn, actually. It's a really wonderful tool when you're doing a one-on-one interview series like this. But it's when I start combing through some of those, I'm like, oh, you worked on that and you worked on that and that connects to this person. And I'm starting to find more and more of these scenarios, especially within kind of the local Australian sphere. And being an Australian show, I do try and zero in a little bit more on some local talent whenever and wherever possible.
Yep.
Starting to see the threads that kind of connect this person to that person to that person to that person, and it's really cool. I'm loving it. So
nice.
Keeps you very busy.
Like names that jump to mind for me, and no pressure to get these guys on board, but Ken Levine.
Taking some notes.
Ken Levine would be number one in my mind. Thomas Mahler, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's from Moon Studios behind.
Yeah, Thomas and I spoke last year about doing it, and it's just one of those ones that kind of fell away. So I'll have to reignite that conversation for you at some point.
Yeah, please do. And I'm forgetting their names, but the boys behind Cuphead, Studio MDHR.
Moldenhauer.
Yep.
Moldenhauer.
See, I either forgot or even if I did remember, I'm not sure I'd have the bravery to take a crack at how to pronounce it, but good on you.
Yeah, I think Moldenhauer or something like that. So
nice.
They'd be awesome too.
Also, the Play Dead guys, I know, is it Dean? forgetting their names, but they've since split. Like one's still at Play Dead and the other's gone off to do something else. But yeah, Inside and Limbo, two of my favorite games of all time. So anyway, inspiration
cool games
for you, Paul.
Do some cool stuff.
Anyway, we should get cracking with the show. This is the question box. It's divided into two segments. In the first segment, we have our top three. We pick three of the biggest gaming news stories from the industry to discuss. And in the latter segment, we pivot into question time. We bring in one big theme, topic, or trend to talk about. And I couldn't go anywhere else other than PlayStation when having Paul on the show. So we will be discussing the recent rumor that they might be rolling, pun intended, Crunchyroll into PlayStation Plus service. We'll dive into what that means for them and subscription models and whatnot, and inevitably come to the to the discussion about a PlayStation Game Pass competitor as well. I'm really excited to have that conversation. But Paul, are you ready to get cracking with the top three?
Whenever you are.
Let's get into it. Story number one comes by way of gamesindustry.biz. I have, somewhat cleverly named this one Gamer App-etite grows to $1.7 billion per week. Jeffrey Russo over at Games Industry has this story. Mobile gamers spend $1.7 billion every week. app-etite, the mobile data firm, reports rising consumer spending, as well as games bringing in $1 million each month. Today, that in the app-etite, reported today that in the first half of 2021, consumers have spent $1.7 billion on both iOS and Google Play purchases per week globally. Matto, thanks for the follow. Hope you're well. According to the mobile data firm's 2021 mobile gaming teardown report, this spending is a 24% year over year and 40% from pre-pandemic 2019 numbers. The number of games raking in more than $1 million each month is also on the rise. Over the first half of 2021, an average of 810 mobile games reached the $1 million mark each month. That represents an increase of 6% year over year and 25% over the 2019 figures. The top three games the consumers have spent the most on have been Roblox, Genshin Impact, and Honor of Kings. Now, Paul, no mystery that the mobile games market is giant and represents a huge portion of the games industry, particularly when it comes to revenue and also number of players. Obviously, we have the likes of Phil Spencer out here throwing around the idea of 3 billion gamers across the world, and the majority of them coming from the mobile market. But 810 games raking in more than $1 million each month, does that come as a surprise to you?
It's a lot. It doesn't come as a surprise, but I don't think I had some sort of baseline to work with previously. So I guess it shocks me a little bit in that sense that it's quite as high as it is, but doesn't shock me in other ways as well. It doesn't surprise me because what we're seeing in the mobile market these days is starting to look a lot like what we're starting to see in the console space and what we've seen in a lot of other media as well. We're seeing more and more subscription services. So, we obviously think about like the Apple Arcade, for example. So that's just generating constant income. And of course, you get the likes of myself, suckers who signed up day one and then completely forget about it. I am one of those people.
I signed up because I started a new job. I'm on the Central Coast, which is about an hour and a half north of Sydney. I thought, I'll get Apple Arcade. I'll get all these great games and play them on my commute. Lockdown, no commute, no Apple Arcade, but I'm still paying the money.
Yeah. So it sounds like we're both in the same sort of situation
Yeah.
there. And there are some really cool games coming out. Fantasian Part 2 comes out this week, for example. That's a huge Apple Arcade launch coming this week. But so they're doing a good job supporting it. But yeah, beyond that, you do then have a lot of those games that have that in-game sort of games of surface sort of model taking place as well. And again, Genshin's a good example of that. That they're getting you on that hamster wheel and getting you to run and run and run and run. And I don't think it's necessarily dirty tactics or anything like that in the way they're doing it. Like, it's just, I don't think anyone necessarily points at Destiny, for example, and says that they're doing anything particularly horrible in that model. I think for the most part, the fans are pretty happy. Obviously, there's the occasional thing that flares up that people might take issue with. But the general model, people are okay with. And it seems like we're seeing more and more of those games. And so they might flush a couple dollars out of someone this day and a couple dollars out of someone that day. They're not looking for whales. They're not trying to, prey on that kind of whale that's just will sink thousands of dollars into a game. Those people obviously do exist, and good luck to anyone who's making money on those sort of people. But I feel like it's a bit predatory. But anyway, we're seeing more games. It's just more accessible for Joe Citizen to just go, I'll just throw a couple of dollars at this today, and I might throw another couple of dollars at it next week. And there's just so many people that are feeling positive towards the game because they're not being asked to dedicate hundreds of thousands of dollars to just keep up with the rest, that it becomes a fairly self-sustaining model.
Yeah,
It's
and
good work.
I'm going to agree with you on the microtransactions. Firstly, the predatory nature of some of these titles definitely is a concern. But I'm in and my view on this might be a bit biased by the fact that for a good number of years I was at Ubisoft and the main title I worked on was Rainbow Six Siege. But I see how a community and a game like that can thrive when all the content is available to anyone, even if you don't buy any microtransactions, right? It's long gone are the days where player bases are split because 20% of the player population has the latest map pack and the other 80% don't, and that makes for a far lesser experience for all players, right? And I see, and Siege isn't the only game, using this model, but I see maps and characters available to every single person so long as you buy the game, which at this point is very, very cheap. So not quite free to play, but still almost there. And you don't have to spend a dime, and you still get the same experience that a player that is spending $100 a year or more on the game to buy the latest outfits and whatnot. You might get access to a character a bit later than some of those people who have bought the battle pass, but for the most part, Ubisoft has created a business model that sustains the game for more than 6 years at this point, and the player base just grows and grows, and so long as they're keeping up to date with the content and making sure it's a positive experience for anyone in terms of servers and whatnot, that it's hard to argue against microtransactions in that sense. Yeah,
totally.
The other thing I wanted to ask, I look at the top publishers, earning revenue via mobile gaming, and you don't see a lot of the big name publishers that we see on the console and the PC side of things. So we rattle off like EA, Ubisoft, Activision, 2K, Square Enix, Bethesda, Capcom, those guys. You don't see them. Yeah, you don't see them in the mobile market nearly as much. You see Call of Duty up there with Warzone and PUBG up there with PUBG Mobile, and I think EA has like a Star Wars game that does really well. But do we expect, obviously we see Microsoft chasing the mobile gaming market with cloud gaming, but do you expect big publishers anytime soon to crack that market in any meaningful way? We've even seen, Nintendo. They obviously have Pokemon Go, but they've tried before with the Mario Run game, or I can't remember what that was called because it fell flat on its face. But yeah, do you expect? Obviously, we will see these publishers will continue to chase mobile. In fact, PlayStation, I believe, have brought on more people to really chase this market. But do you expect them to crack it in any meaningful way anytime soon?
I feel like it's only a matter of time. These people have thrived. These companies have thrived in the traditional games market for a long, long time, and they know how to do business. It's at some point they are going to crack that egg, and we are seeing. You'd obviously just rattled off a couple names there that are kind of connected to the more traditional model that we've always existed in, that are starting to have some successes over there. And Nintendo have, and Activision has, and we see Square Enix games popping up left, right, and center, and not all of them are doing Roblox numbers or anything like that, of course, but eventually they're going to find their way, and we're going to start to see this work. They've got the resources to make it work, and that's something that aspiring indie or mobile developer typically doesn't have. And so those games that are shooting to the top are ones that have maybe had a little bit of luck. They've created a fantastic product, but there's less luck involved for one of those big established companies, because they've got the financial resources to throw at it as well, and they've got years of experience and all those sorts of things on their side. So it's only a matter of time before we start to see those charts fill up with the tried and true. And of course, we'll still see little games randomly pop up left, right, and center, because we want to see that in the indie space as well. We want to see indie developers just pop up and thrive in the console space or PC or whatever. And I think that's exactly the same in the mobile as well. Currently, it's kind of dominated by them and then a few of the big guys, but those big guys are going to start pushing in. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, I suppose where I would like to see big traditional publishers do better is adapting the IP that we know and love in the console and PC gaming space, and make them work somehow in the mobile market. We've seen like the first example that jumps to mind is Gears Pop, right? Which
Yep.
at face value looked kind of interesting, and I could understand exactly where the coalition was trying to go with that one. Take an IP and
I kind of enjoyed it actually.
yeah, no, I did until you hit that point where it's like, okay, this is where they want my money.
Yeah.
And you either grind until you catch up with those folks, or you cough up the cash. So we see that sort of thing going on. I just wonder when we're going to see the IP that we know and love, really, that are established in the console space, make their way over to mobile and really make sense on that platform. Because we see some publishers, and again I'll go to Ubisoft just because that's where my experience lies, that they have IP that don't exist or necessarily flourish in the console space, that are doing well. So in Ubisoft's case, we have something like Hungry Shark or Brawlhalla as well, which is available on consoles but still does well on mobile also. And yeah, I'm wondering, like, do we just see them come up with different IP, right? Like, and that's just fits the mobile space better and doesn't necessarily have baggage from some of these AAA games. I'm wondering, what can happen there, and particularly in PlayStation's case, if they are going to choose IP to adapt, what are they going to be? Do you have any like thoughts on, if your ideal PlayStation mobile experiences?
I don't, and I guess maybe that's a little bit of old school sort of bias against playing in mobile, and maybe a classist sort of thing creeping in there, which I don't really want to be, but maybe can't help it a little bit there. Look, there's plenty of franchises that can absolutely work, and we've seen Run Sackboy Run back in the day, which was obviously just adopting that endless runner model that I quite enjoyed. God bless him for putting it on the Vita as well. I went and chased down the platinum on that, but like they've got IP that would fit, and it's just a matter of working out how, and not necessarily being so zeroed in on I need to replicate the Uncharted third person experience. It can actually be something totally different, and that's okay. And actually, it might also be good for some of that external perception from gamers as well. If they look at it and they go, "You're not trying to recreate my game that I love in the mobile model. You're actually just trying to do something different with it," and that might be an easier pill for some of those fans to swallow as well. So that's kind of a potential factor in the whole thing. And another variable in the whole mix that I guess wouldn't be contributing to this 1.7 billion is what Xbox is trying to do with Game Pass on mobile and those sort of things. So they're trying to reach a mobile market, but technically not a cent of that is going to Apple or Google or anyone along the way. It's the Microsoft ecosystem. You just linking in via your app, but you're playing with Microsoft, you're playing with Xbox. You're not embracing that mobile market whatsoever. So that's another important perspective on the whole thing when it comes to the big guys and how they might try and infiltrate, is that they don't necessarily need to create a mobile game. They just need to potentially create a way for you to access their core games without buying the console. And there's billions of people, again 3 billion people as Phil Spencer says, that are accessible through that. And obviously you're not going to get all of them, because some people will be intimidated by the idea that that's not Candy Crush. I don't want to shoot people in the face and all that sort of thing, but there's also others that have maybe looked at this sort of thing for years but didn't want to sit at their TV, or a big handheld console like a Switch is still a little bit too much for them. But their phone that they're carrying with them and using all the time, that's palatable. So that's a potential opportunity for all these publishers as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'll get to chat now. Buddy Watson, thanks for joining us. He says, Resogun type high score mobile game. Now they own Housemarque. I think that could definitely work. Those arcade style games require very little complicated input, right? So that could work fantastically. And pop culturists, I assume Ryan, hope you're well, Ryan, if that is you. Simple experiences like Parappa and Patapon would be dope. Games that worked well on PSP or Vita, seeing as they are both done now. Yeah, no, I think that'd be most fitting. I think that they both touch on what my preference would be for mobile games, and we'll pivot now into a question that I wanted to ask here with you, Paul, around the appetite for people who play games on mobile. What will that be for when they are introduced to something like Xbox Cloud Gaming? Like, are they going to be receptive to this idea? And I think for me, it comes down to the experience just needs to be designed around the functionality of the device, right? And obviously we see you can connect your controller or buy yourself a Razer Kishi or a Backbone and give yourselves the means to play a game more traditionally. But when I think of playing games on mobile in a more that are a bit more traditional or more similar to
Yeah.
console or PC counterparts. I'm thinking of games that just fit that device. So my ideal game for cloud gaming, at least with Xbox, is Viva Pinata, because that's just like a perfect chill, just scroll around your garden, not fast paced at all. Something that I can play on my console on my PC at home and then pick up on the go while I'm commuting to work, for instance. So again, just experiences that are tailor made for the device. But to get back to the question, I suppose, what do you think when cloud gaming, reaches its point where it's, ready to penetrate that 3 billion gamer sized market? What do you think the reaction is going to be? Do you think it's again, it's like, oh, I'm happy with my Candy Crush, or like the adoption rate? How do you see it playing out?
Oh, look, it might be a slow trickle to begin with. But eventually you can get that 1 or 2% every month or every year that just might go and I'll just try this because it's here, or maybe because there is a subscription service like say a Game Pass style equivalent. We're like, okay, well I'll try that thing. And I guess Apple Arcade kind of is that. Again, like I referenced Fantasia before, and I guess not everyone's going to go, oh, JRPG. They should, because JRPGs are awesome. But you're going to get a small sample of people who go, well, what's this? And they'll try it out, and they might come to love it. And then they'll fall down that well, and they'll go and explore a little bit further, and all of a sudden they'll discover Final Fantasy, and it starts to kind of snowball from there, and they might become a veteran of that genre, or potentially even invest in a console and start to explore things from there. So that's sorry, all those non-JRPG people who just got a little fed up with me then. Just a good example. So like there's opportunities like that can spin from there, and I guess I'm now going JRPG again, but Genshin Impact is another good example of it. That the way that game works on mobile is different to the way it works on the consoles, but it's all still under the same umbrella. Your save still transfers, all your data can transfer straight across. So you can pick it up and play no matter what your preference is. You're good to go. And I think if we start seeing more games that kind of adopt that sort of approach that works for the mobile consumer, it works for the console or PC player, then it doesn't matter where you play, you're still going to get an experience that's optimized to your preferred play style. You're going to be happy as well. And that just makes it easy for people to potentially go one way or the other, go from console to mobile or mobile to console.
Yeah.
Slash PC.
No, definitely. Speaking of RPGs, one that worked fantastically on the Vita, and I don't know why I'm bringing up Ubisoft again here, but I think that this is a game that would work perfectly on mobile is Child of Light. Did you ever play that one?
Yes.
How good was Child of Light?
Yeah, Child of Light's amazing.
Oh, brilliant.
And I desperately would like to see more. Just anything from UbiArt would be nice.
That would be, yeah, it seems to be on the back burner for now from Ubisoft. But anyway,
not too late.
That's it. Let's pivot now into story number 2. Again, we go to gamesindustry.biz, where James Batchelor, the editor-in-chief there, has a piece on Raccoon Logic, which is a, quote, new studio formed from the rubble of Typhoon, a studio that was picked up by Google for purposes of Stadia in 2019. We all know how their first-party ventures with cloud gaming have gone. Let me bring up the story so everyone can see it for themselves. He says, life after Stadia, Raccoon Logic picks up where Typhoon Studios left off. Now, I really enjoy this story. We'll just get into it just at the top there, and there's some great bits and pieces later on about that we can discuss around studio acquisitions as well, Paul. James says, a team of former AAA developers have today announced the formation of a new studio in Montreal named Raccoon Logic, except new might be something of an exaggeration. Most of the team were already working together until early this year, when Google shut down its internal Stadia Games and Entertainment Studios. Raccoon Logic is formed by many of the folks who had previously been at Typhoon Studios, a studio behind comical sci-fi shooter Journey to the Savage Planet, a studio which Google acquired and brought into the Stadia fold back in 2019. So obviously we know the story with Stadia. Shortly after Microsoft picked up Bethesda, they dissolved all their first-party efforts in the space. Google Stadia as a product is still available and supports the games that are available there from a third-party capacity, though you shouldn't expect an exclusive Stadia internally developed titles from Google on the platform moving forward. Just quickly on that, Paul, like, does Stadia stick around much longer, do you think?
How can it? It's just, if you're not going to provide anyone with anything unique, then what's the reason for them to jump ship from a Steam or something like that, for example, or the Epic Game Store? Like, there's absolutely no incentive, or even more drastic, come across from the console space. Like, it's just not. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So I feel like it's only a matter of time, and we know what Google is like as a company anyway. Ignoring their this recent games initiative, as a rule, they're pretty quick to pull the pin on something if it's not working, and they've already started to do that. And it's only a matter of time before they just say, "We're done. Let's just walk away."
Yep. Speaking of pulling the pin, do you see that sort of, quick in and out by Google as a potential red flag for any other studios maybe around the world who, when they enter just into talks about acquisition, that's sort of something that plays in their mind, particularly from big tech, right, who haven't played in the gaming space? I'm thinking Apple and Amazon or and the likes. Do you think that's something that's in the back of their mind?
Yeah, I mean, it should be, especially if you're entertaining a conversation with someone who isn't established. So your Amazon one is a great example because they've picked up a few studios over the journey. Anyone who's joining, and I guess they're slightly more established these days, but Facebook with Oculus. So we've seen Ready at Dawn jump across there, and those
That's
sort of,
right,
and
yeah.
they're risky endeavors because these are companies whose bread is buttered by other services, other products, and at any point, if they see that things aren't going all that well, they could pull the pin. And I mean, let's be real. Until Phil Spencer came along, Microsoft was even in that boat. Like he had to really work hard to get that buy-in from the executive level, from Satya Nadella and the like. And he's got that these days. And now they're willing to throw boatloads of cash at them. And so that's why you see Bethesda and everyone jumping across. That wasn't a decision they were willing to make before, and it took the right pitch to get there. And there's a lot of these other companies in that Google sort of mold that they don't need gaming. Amazon doesn't need gaming. Facebook doesn't need gaming. So if the financials aren't stacking up, they could at any point say, "No, that's it, we're done." And that flies in the face of obviously Sony, for example, who they're the complete opposite of this, where their bread their bread was buttered for years by things that were not gaming, but all of that has kind of fallen by the wayside over the years. Their TV, the Bravias are great TVs, but they're not, lighting it up against Samsung or LG. And it's PlayStation that's kind of propping that company up right now. And so they'll throw all their money at PlayStation to keep it going and by extension, keep themselves going. So it's an interesting space. And yeah, if I was a developer being pitched by some of these companies, I'd be more enticed by an established game company than I would be one of those others we mentioned before. So again, Amazon or Google or whatever, because you just don't know when they're going to walk away.
Yeah.
And it is so hard to get in as well. Like that's the other variable in here. Like Google's got more money than God, and yet they couldn't do it. And that's simply because they didn't have the first party suite to offer some sort of point of difference to the other consoles or platforms. And here we are.
You mentioned the likes of Facebook and Amazon not needing gaming to survive, where PlayStation or Sony rather is in a very different situation. How do you feel that Apple and Amazon in particular, who just are a couple of the big tech companies left really playing, I'd say, seriously in this space, right? Like Apple Arcade is seems like something that will persist and seems to be doing well for Apple.
They've done that one really well.
And Amazon's Luna, they've got a great deal of momentum behind them with something like New World, which is out next month, and I'm not sure what Double Helix, which I think the other studio they acquired, is up to at the moment, but they seem to be having more success than Google at this point. What do you think their future holds? We'll just focus on Amazon for now.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing is really the software, like having a point of difference in terms of the actual product that's available for players, and obviously not just having a number of games, but having really excellent ones. And third-party timed exclusives don't work like that, because especially once the consumer cottons on to the fact that okay, it's going to be there for a little while, but then I can eventually get it on my PlayStation or my Xbox or my Switch or PC, whatever. Then you're not winning anything here. You need to be able to say this thing is developed by one of our internal studios, and that's why you want to come here. And it's exactly what Xbox is trying to do right now. Like that's the war they were losing to PlayStation and Nintendo for the longest time, is that PlayStation and Nintendo had the exclusives that brought people in the door. Xbox didn't have that. And sure, Game Pass is fantastic and it's growing and it's doing some wonderful things, but there is still a collective hesitation, I think. Just anecdotally, and what I see on the internet is still there's a hesitancy because they haven't yet proven themselves in that space. Halo's great, Gears is amazing. I love Gears so much. But they're still too few and far between. But now that you add Bethesda in there, who, I mean, they're still working kind of autonomously as well. They're kind of established and will do their own thing. And you add Obsidian and all these other studios they've picked up along the way. It's only a matter of time. I mean, Phil Spencer's spoken about every 3 months they want to have a AAA release.
That's it. Yeah, at least every quarter. That was Matt Booty from Xbox Game Studios said that. At
Yeah, I was
least.
Matt Booty. Sorry,
Yeah.
okay. Like that's amazing for them. And so then if you're Amazon or Apple or anyone like that, and I get maybe not Apple, but Amazon who's looking to establish themselves as an actual key player, and I mean to produce something of real substance every quarter is a little bit unrealistic straight out the gate. But you need to look down that path. Like, what can we guarantee people that is
Mm.
going to be of excellent quality that's going to make them want to buy in? Because otherwise, why would they deviate from their PlayStation or their Xbox or their Switch? It's
Yeah,
a
no,
hard one.
I'm completely in alignment with you. You touched upon something. What unique thing does Google have that makes it? What unique selling point? Not even unique gaming experience does it have? There was one piece that came, or one quote that came out of the games industry piece around Typhoon and Raccoon Logic, and the person being interviewed had noted that. Stadia was, for all intents and purposes, the best place to play Cyberpunk at launch. So there is, at least some argument for cloud gaming, at least in today's market. Maybe not the strongest example to point to, but one nonetheless. Buddy in chat
Certainly one
says,
of the heaviest
remember.
criticized games.
Buddy in chat says, I remember Ouya. That's Stadia now. No one really cares for it. Oh boy, yeah. I was old enough to remember Ouya, and yeah, the Dennis
Powerful,
Dennis
baby.
Dyack rattling on about the one console future. Man, that seems like a conversation from a long time ago. Do you remember Ouya, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, Towerfall was the big thing going for it, and of course
That's
that
right.
that
Yeah.
came elsewhere. But and I did look on kind of enviously at that, but I still wasn't going to buy it for one game.
Right. Yeah,
So,
it reminds
and
me
again,
of
that's kind of the point. Like, one game is great, and it might be a 10 out of 10, but if I've now got to wait another 2-3 years before that developer's able to produce something again of that sort of quality, like that's not enough.
Yeah.
Not with everything else I'm leaving behind.
It kind of reminds me of VR as well, right? If you don't have say Beat Saber's great, right? And when my roommate who I lived with previously, he got VR and we got Beat Saber, I had a blast. But there's no way I'm spending the X hundreds of dollars to get a VR headset just for Beat Saber. Like, what other compelling experiences are going to be on their way in the near future that I can bank on that my investment in this piece of tech is going to be worth it, right? And I think it's the same for these guys. Like, yeah, let's say you have a killer app, a Mario 64 level quality game at the launch of next year for Amazon Luna that's only available via Luna. Yeah, I might be tempted to sign up for a month and try it out and see what all the fuss is, but I'm not sticking around with that subscription unless you tell me that, you've got some compelling content, even if it was just what Game Pass does right now for the moment, right? Which is, filling in the year with these quirky indie games and some big third-party titles like Outriders and MLB and that sort of thing. And you touch upon something there that I completely agree with around Xbox's first party. And it's a video I created not too long ago on my YouTube channel, which I'll shamelessly plug right now. And that is, Xbox is unproven. Like they have 23, theoretically really great studios, but there's a lot there that I'm thinking of Compulsion Games, who have done We Happy Few and Contrast and haven't quite hit the mark. Playground, their Forza team is strong, but this is a completely new team working on Fable. Who's to say that they're going to produce the same quality? And the same thing with the Initiative with Perfect Dark. Like, it all sounds fantastic, these veteran developers coming together in Santa Monica to create this quadruple A Perfect Dark reboot, but they are unproven. Like, the first time these guys are working together. So yeah, they still have a lot to convince of the wider industry as well, which is I think why you still see some hesitation around the faith in Xbox's first party, right? It's just like, you don't have the track record to throw around like PlayStation and Nintendo for that matter do as well.
And that's why we kind of see now with the console sales of the new machines, despite everything that the Xbox is doing and they are optically winning the battle, PlayStation is still winning the sales battle.
Yeah.
By, what was it, 35% or something like that? Like, that's not an insignificant amount. And, that is something they can turn, but it's going to boil down to the products they put out there. And I guess the one point of difference, and you did highlight it there for any of these new parties, so again, the Amazons and co that are coming through, they do have an opportunity in the sense that they're not trying to sell a box. Maybe you need a little USB stick or something like that potentially in some cases, but that's the extent of it. They're not trying to sell you a piece of kit that's going to sit under your entertainment unit. It's something that you can just stream in or whatever the case is, and that is an opportunity there where what you described is, I sign up for a month and then I let it lapse or whatever, and you hope that you don't fall down the Apple Arcade well like we both have, and 12 years on, you're going, oh my god, I've lost thousands of dollars to this thing and I've not played it once. But like, that is the opportunity there for them you can just drop in and subscribe for a month and get that game, and then maybe what their hope would be is that a few months later you subscribe again because there's one game that's really cool. Then you do it, and then all of a sudden you've gone, oh, maybe it's at a point now where I can just persist with this, and there's
Mm.
enough other stuff supplementing that will keep them going. But they're not there yet. One game does not do the job, unfortunately, no
Yeah,
matter how
definitely.
good it might end up being.
Yeah, and Ryan in chat echoes what we've been touching on. Xbox's first-party potential is massive. I cannot wait to see what they can deliver. Yeah, he's hoping those, they can turn out some bangers. Like I think Halo Infinite this holiday will be, I think, could be a serious inflection point for them. Like the multiplayer is looking strong. If they can nail the campaign, it might kick off a new narrative for them this generation, right? Where it's like, okay, first party is, Xbox's first party is nothing to be trifled with. And thankfully, you've got Forza there as a surefire thing, at least most people would say. Let's pivot now to story number 3, one that I'm sure will make many old folk like us happy, Paul, and that is the rumor that GTA Remastered Trilogy appears to be real, coming to a variety of consoles, including the Switch. We head on over to Kotaku, where Zach Zizwen, apologies, Zach, I'm sure I butchered it, writes this piece. After months of rumors and speculation, Kotaku has learned from sources that Rockstar Games may be mastering 3 classic Grand Theft Auto games. Currently, it appears these games will be released later this fall, American fall, I'd say, for a multitude, of platforms, including the portable Nintendo Switch. For the past year, rumors have soared on Twitter, Reddit, and various message boards that Rockstar is working on remakes or remasters of classic PS2-era Grand Theft Auto titles. These rumors only grew in popularity as Rockstar's parent company, Take-Two Interactive, used DMCA takedowns to remove classic GTA mods from the internet, while announcing that the publisher had 3 remastered games in development. While Kotaku can't confirm what all of those teased remastered titles specifically are, we can confirm via corroborating details from 3 sources that GTA Remasters currently in the final stages of development. I won't go into the exact details here, but it's seemingly that we'll have new... I'll note here, all 3 of these games are being remastered using Unreal Engine and will be a mix of new and old graphics. One source who claims to have seen a snippet of the games in action said that the visuals reminded them of a heavily modded version of a classic GTA title. So, seemingly, Paul, this might be somewhat of a decent remake treatment for these titles, not just a simple... let's port it from, 3 generations ago now, old tech over to these new consoles, make them, 16:9, 4K resolution with a frame rate boost, but still, I suppose retain the old graphics that came with the PS2 and the Xbox and GameCube generation. So yeah, does that get you excited? And do we see these, I suppose, landing in the same way, popularity-wise, that they did originally, considering, GTA 5 has sold 150 million copies, and the expectations of gamers nowadays are much higher.
Oh, for sure. Look, I won't hide the fact that I'm not a massive GTA guy. I do like playing them, but I'm not, I guess, mad about them like a lot of people can be. But when it comes to GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas, firstly, they are fantastic titles, but I am a little concerned if we're talking remaster, and that's simply because... and popping my PlayStation hat on again, those 3 titles got the PS2 to PS4 treatment. So they did already get the 16:9, and they did already get the 1080p and all those sorts of things added to them. So, little quality of life improvements. So if there's a remaster that then comes to, I mean, if they're talking Switch, then obviously we're talking PS4/PS5, Xbox One/Xbox Series. Already some of the key selling points are already out there for people if they want them. So I really hope that obviously the article's still talking about, remake/remaster. I really hope that we are far more on that remake side to justify that purchase. Now, obviously not a lot of people probably picked up the PS2 to PS4 versions of them. I'm sure there's a substantial amount. I'm sure they're the best performing of all those PS2 to PS4 games because of the brand alone. But, they didn't light it up in that space. But there's going to be a few people like, well, what really are you offering here if it's just a remaster? Because I can already get that. I already own it, in some cases. So I hope that there is a little bit more love put into it than a simple remaster, especially given they've had a long time to do something with the GTA franchise. Like a new entry or some sort of actually new box on the shelf with a GTA title. So if it's just a simple remaster, I'd feel a little bit underwhelmed by that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I mean, it's interesting they're saying it's a mix of new and old. So where that sweet spot is a fascinating one. I'll be really keen to see it. Um, Not too sure. The other interesting thing in the article is that they're talking about how, depending on the success of this, they'll then go to Red Dead afterwards. That excites me.
You're a Red Dead man.
I'm a Red Dead man, but I don't know. Like, I mean, if we kind of actually remade that in the same engine that, say, Red Dead 2 is in, oh, that thing. I mean, that Red Dead, the original, still looks pretty good.
Yeah.
But it is a 11-year-old game now. If that was to be running on the same sort of engine or as Red Dead 2, that's just like pierce my eyes out good. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
I'm not a Red Dead fan myself, but I can't, argue with how gorgeous number 2 looks, and I'd be curious to see, if they could get the original up to the same quality. Keeping with the topic of remakes, third story is just a bunch of stories around remakes that I've sort of jumbled into one. We head on over to Xbox Era. Let me bring it up so everyone can see. Revitalized edition of Quake to be announced at QuakeCon, per now scrubbed event description. Now, we had rumors, courtesy of Nick Baker over at Xbox Era, that a female-led Quake game was in development between Machine Games and id Software a few weeks, maybe even a month or two ago at this point. But this story is new and based off of some QuakeCon details that were shared. Early today, the schedule for QuakeCon 2021 went up, with a surprising bit of spoilery news to be found if one clicked into the calendar event for Friday's Let's Talk Quake event. John Linneman of Digital Foundry will be talking with Jerk Gustafsson, really unfortunate first name, of Machine Games about a, quote, revitalized edition, end quote, of the game Quake, which appears to be a co-production between id and Machine Games. The page was quickly scrubbed of this information, and visiting it now gives you only ... as the description of the event. Machine Games will be on stage with id the day before as well at the opening event to celebrate the history of the franchise. So, here we go. We have Special Nick from Xbox Era, seemingly, patting himself on the back for this one. But yeah, my question is, like, again, I haven't been a huge Bethesda fan really for that long of a time. I sort of jumped on board with Skyrim, I think, first. I didn't quite enjoy Oblivion or Fallout 3. I've since gone back and tried the Wolfenstein games, which I absolutely adore. And Doom, it's just, for whatever reason, just doesn't click with me. But I'm wondering, Paul, firstly, Bethesda fan, yes or no? And Quake as well. What sort of place does it take in the modern age of gaming? It kind of feels like Duke Nukem for me. I don't know if that's blasphemous at all, but I'm just wondering what relevance it has nowadays.
Look, I'm not an old school sort of Quake fan or anything like that. I've dabbled in some like Quake Champions, for example, just to try it out, and I get it. It's fun. Arena shooters are cool, but I don't have that nostalgic sort of look on that franchise. When it comes to other Bethesda stuff, I got on board with Morrowind. For whatever reason, missed Oblivion, fell in love with Skyrim. I'm not a Fallout guy at all, despite the fact that there's so many commonalities between the two. It's the setting that just doesn't jive with me.
I'm the same.
For whatever
it's
reason.
So depressing. I do not want to be
there.
Yeah,
I think that's a part of it. VATS just doesn't quite feel, as a person who kind of comes from slow RPGs, turn-based style, to like it doesn't transition quite. Like, I know what they're trying to go for with VATS, but it doesn't quite fit there. It's a very awkward middle ground with what they've done there. So there's just a few things that haven't quite clicked with me with Fallout. And I exaggerate my distaste for the franchise at times, but it just simply doesn't quite click. What was the other half of that question, though?
Just so fun to me. Yeah, I should have broken them up. But Quake, what sort of position does it take in today's gaming world? Like, is it relevant anymore?
Look, they're trying to keep it relevant. I think Quake Champions is that. If they're looking to remake it or remaster it in some fashion, that's nice. But I don't think it's not them trying to use as a launching pad for something new. I think that is Quake Champions in and of itself. And if they might try and leverage that to then say, okay, here's Quake next, and here's your campaign, and here's some multiplayer and that sort of thing. I don't know that they'll try and use a remake or remaster or whatever of an old one. I think that's them just throwing a bone to the fans and saying, well, in the nice sense, like, here's something you've probably wanted for years. There's a lot of love for this. Here you go. Similar to what Blizzard's tried to do with Diablo 2 and what we've seen EA do with Mass Effect and all those sorts of things. And a few of these companies, in the ones I just cited, were ones that were bit hesitant to kind of go back and remake or remaster old games. EA most notably like, no, we don't do that. And then Mass Effect came along.
I'm about to say, then,
And now
Andrew
it feels
Wilson
like the
saying it's
flood.
performed
Yeah.
above expectations. So.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of other companies that are seeing that. I mean, we look at what Square Enix did with Near Replicant early in the year, and that's them kind of polishing up PS3 game, making little tweaks. We are entering a really interesting space when it comes to remakes and remasters, and I guess this could be another factor in the GTA thing, like we just discussed, that a remake or a remaster doesn't necessarily just need to be as simple as what the name might imply these days. We are starting to see games, and Nier is a really great example where it kind of straddles a little bit of both. Same with Shadow of the Colossus the other year, where that's a very traditional remake. We've got Nier that's somewhere in the middle. We've got others that are just straight up remasters, and then we've got others that are kind of building on it and adding new bits, or here's some cut content and those sort of things. It's a really cool space that we're in, that we're not just looking at, okay, here's the old game with a new coat of paint. We can do some cool things with it. And you'd imagine with Quake, there might be some quality of life stuff there, but they could also just go down that Doom path where we've seen, sorry, not Doom, Duke Nukem. We've seen the World Tour edition pop up on our consoles and PC, and it's basically just the same old game with some little quality of life tweaks, and that's it. And people still enjoy that because that's a nostalgic thing for them. There's a lot of different lenses they could approach this from. I'd be fascinated to see what they do, but I'm not a big Quake person, so I don't think I'm not going to be rushing out and buying it unless it's something amazing in the end.
Yeah, you touched on the rough edges with some of those older games as well. Just to bring in Ryan's comment earlier about GTA. Going back, they look and control rough, like really rough. These three games are pivotal in gaming history. Yes, they have the PS2 bump for PS4. Are they still not ideal compared to current standards? So yeah, I think they have a real challenge ahead of themselves to, for particularly the younger generation who might be, really well engaged with GTA 5 now, to say, hey, here's our legacy, here's our history with this franchise, but is that at all compelling for them as well? You mentioned
it'll still sell 50 million copies because it's GTA.
It's GTA, that's it. And then, you touched upon, I suppose, the different... we don't quite yet have a very clear vernacular for exactly what a remaster is and exactly what a remake is. And I think most of the gaming community will admit it's kind of annoying, right?
Yeah. And then there's reimagining in there as well these days.
Yeah. Where you see, you say remake, and I think people hope for Resident Evil 2, right? Or Demon's Souls or Final Fantasy. And then sometimes you get like, Saints Row Get Out of Hell edition, which is essentially the same game, maybe with like a FPS boost. So yeah, I suppose in this instance, I'm most curious to see what place Quake has in Xbox and Bethesda's library. Like, I think Quake Champions, I might be mistaken, I don't know if it's big at all, but as someone who has worked on an esport and was keeping tabs of all the biggest shooters in the industry, Quake never crossed my path, my screen. It's not even a word I don't think I've said since before this story for 10 years, I'd want to say. So yeah, I'm curious to see how they can bring it back. I think no franchise is ever truly dead until obviously a company comes along with great love and care and revives it in a way that can really appeal to modern games. And we see it's something that I noted, I think, either last episode or the episode before, and that Resident Evil 6 could have been viewed as the nail in the coffin for RE, but Capcom put up their socks and put out 7, and then fantastic remakes in 2 and 3. So I truly believe that like they've done with Doom, right? They've sort of revitalized it. Wolfenstein as well. I think the studios behind this rumored Quake remake or remaster has a lot of they're proven in that sense, and I think a lot of people will be giving them a chance if this proves to be true. Here's hoping it's not too far away, because Xbox, I know, has a bit of a gap early next year as well. So I'm praying for a quick turnaround announcement at QuakeCon later this month, and then hey, it's out in 6 months' time. That would be really nice.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Keeping on the train of remakes, the last part of story number 3, we stick with Bethesda. There were rumors of a new studio being created within the Bethesda umbrella, dedicated to remakes and remasters. We know this is something that a lot of Bethesda fans have been calling for. Remakes for Morrowind, Oblivion, Fallout, New Vegas in particular as well. And I think a lot of this stems from the fact that we see Bethesda game studios themselves trap themselves on one game for a good 4 or 5 years, and then if they are going to rotate between Starfield, Elder Scrolls, and Fallout, you might not be seeing new entries in these franchises for a good 10 or 12 years. So obviously you have Elder Scrolls Online and Fallout 76 sort of feeding the fan base, but I'm not sure it's
the MMO is very different.
Exactly. I'm not sure it's quite satiating them in the way that they'd want. So when you see this rumor, Paul, is this something that you think Bethesda and Xbox would be smart to concoct and put together?
I mean, linking in with everything else that we've discussed so far, remasters, remakes. For a while there, I think there was probably this concern internally within developers and publishers, like, are people really going to want this, or are they just going to want the next big release? And of course, they do want the next big release. And Elder Scrolls 6, if you could come out sometime before the pandemic kills us all, that'd be great. But that's probably not going to happen. I think they've come to realize in recent years that you can actually have both. You can remake or remaster Morrowind and put out Elder Scrolls 6, or similar sort of things with Fallout, or whatever the case happens to be. The re-releases, they didn't really do too much to them, but the re-releases of Doom 1, 2, 3 on the consoles as kind of a pre-order incentive, but you can obviously now buy them separately. Pre-order incentive for Doom Eternal was fantastic. Like here, at this date, they're gonna be available. And if you pre-order the game, you can download them now, and Doom Eternal will be out in 3-4 months. And like, that's brilliant in terms of marketing and getting people hyped up for this thing. They go back, they mess around with the back catalog. They might be new to the franchise. They might have only gotten in with Doom 2016, and so we get to see the origins of this and feed that frenzy that's gradually building for the next year release. It's really good and really clever. So if they're going to establish a studio that's going to do this stuff, now obviously we hear about it when it comes to the core Bethesda Game Studios titles all the time in both Elder Scrolls and Fallout. I think it'd be a great strategy, especially obviously we're going to be waiting. My jokes aside, we're probably going to be waiting at least 3 to 4 years for Elder Scrolls 6 at this point, you'd think.
If Starfield lands when it's supposed to, end of 2022, I'd say 2025 is the earliest, probably 2026.
Yeah, you would have thought so, unless there's a bit of parallel development going on.
Yeah, potentially.
And that is an option, of course. They're now incredibly cashed up thanks to Microsoft with their billions of dollars that went straight into Todd Howard and Pete Hines' pockets.
Yeah.
So it is an option, but you're right. It's still going to be a long time. So they are hearing people saying, "Where's my Elder Scrolls? It's already been 10 years. Like it will be 10 years in a few months from now since Skyrim came out. That's a crazy long time.
Yep.
To hold off on a delay to one of the biggest games of all time.
Yeah. 6 years since Fallout 4 as well.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
So why not remaster or remake some of these things, or just put a little bit of TLC into them? There's no harm. You're going to be, if it doesn't sell all that well, which of course, these franchises will, but even if it doesn't sell well, you haven't had to throw the kitchen sink at it financially. It's not a massive outlay of cash, presumably for a lot coming in. Again, EA is discovering this now with Mass Effect, and it's selling well above their expectations. Look at what EA has done and use that as a model.
Yeah.
Again, Sony's been doing it for a while, and there's obviously all the rumors about The Last of Us, the original Last of Us being remade and those sort of things. Like, there's a lot of companies doing this thing now. Square Enix is thriving on it. It's worthwhile investing in, and again, these developers and publishers have realized that people aren't as crazy about the new release as perhaps they thought, where they would just ignore everything else. They do want to embrace the past and the present. So,
yeah, no, I agree. And
feed the beast.
There's a lot. We point to so many success stories as well, and I even look internally at Microsoft, who Obviously something like the Master Chief Collection stumbled out of the gate a bit, but since then, through the hard work from 343 to really repair that game, it's living a great life both on console and PC at the moment. Even things like the deluxe editions of all the previous Age of Empires games are doing very, very well. In fact, there's a small, thriving esports scene around Age 2 once more. It's really fascinating. So,
didn't they add like a battle royale mode or something to that?
yeah, so I'm surprised, and in fact, I've been quite critical of the fact that I don't think Xbox, and putting Bethesda aside for a moment, I don't think Xbox is leaning into their own their history and their legacy and some of their more beloved franchises nearly as much as they should have. Now, we've seen them, do things like Battletoads, and they are investing in Fable and Perfect Dark and bringing those back, but they still have a lot more they could be doing. And on the Bethesda side,
Bear and the Bird.
Yeah, please, Bear and the Bird, Conquer, what else?
Viva Pinata,
Viva Pinata, of course. Viva. Thank you. In fact, if that's the one, I'll stop complaining about anything else.
Keep fighting the battle for me, sir.
On the Bethesda side, I'm wondering if a whole new studio is the smartest way to be going about this, right? Like, we've seen things like the Master Chief Collection put together by the likes of Saber Interactive, who have since been acquired, and Certain Affinity, who are a multiplayer, specific studio born from ex-Bungie talent way back when, who are very familiar with the game. So, if they are going to make remakes of Morrowind and Oblivion and Fallout New Vegas, which I think are the top of most people's lists, I just wonder if putting together a whole new studio, which might take a couple of years to build up, be the smartest option. And what happens to them after you're run out of material to remake? Do you chuck a PlayStation and start remaking games that don't need to be remade, like The Last of Us, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, because I think there's a lot of people that do look at the Bluepoint model, what's going on there, and obviously Shadow of the Colossus, and then Demon's Souls, which you could argue whether it was or wasn't required, but turned out to be fantastic.
Yep.
We are seeing these examples that work. You're right, the catalog there isn't as vast, especially if they're going to work exclusively with Bethesda titles. But I guess you've got some old Arcane titles you could mess around with. Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, for example. Don't know that's going to light it up sales-wise, but there's those games there that they could explore a little bit as well. So there's something there for them to work with. But you're right. Once they're done with Morrowind, Oblivion, Fallout 3, New Vegas, and maybe even Fallout 4, but that's obviously only one generation removed at this point. There's not a hell of a lot left for you to work with, really. Yeah. Unless you do want to go and remake the original Doom and expand to the id titles. Id would be the one to really delve into, because their history is so vast.
Definitely.
But even then, they put out, as I mentioned before, they did put out those old games, and sure, they're not remakes or anything like that, but they still exist, and it would be hard to take the core of the original Doom, remake that, and then have people look and go, but Doom Eternal's so much better. Like, all the stuff that's kind of come from years of just improvement and refinement and development expertise. So some of these things won't age overly well.
Yeah,
so it's a weird spot to be in.
And that's something I was like, well, not critical of, but I was just like, became apparent to me when something like Combat Evolved Anniversary Edition came out way back in 2011 on the 360. It's just that Halo games have come a really long way since Combat Evolved, and this is slow and sluggish, and I don't blame anyone who picks this up for the first time and doesn't have a fun time with it, because it plays like a 2001 shooter. So we get back to chat, and Ryan has said, post-COVID, I foresee a lot of remakes and remasters as they continue to be the safest investments. Less risk and an easy gauge on potential return from at least the diehards, he says. Yeah, I completely agree. He also notes, as long as the creation engine is scrapped, rebuilt, or a whole new engine is used, it's pretty cooked. Same engine since pre-Morrowind, with just layer on layer of repairs and upgrades. So yeah, we know Starfield 2 is creation engine 2. So now how much of the original creation engine still exists inside, at the core of that engine, not sure, but at least Starfield looking pretty schmick based on the one trailer we've seen. And he says Xbox could literally get Obsidian to work on a new Vegas remaster. Yeah, most people are calling for a sequel, right? Like Obsidian, Fallout, Bethesda, all under Phil Spencer's umbrella at this point. So
not to mention all the Wasteland guys. I've just gone blank on the studio's name, but obviously the ones who did Fallout 1, 2, and Tactics back in the day as well. Like they're in there with Obsidian and Bethesda these days too. So they've got the entire family there to work with. So,
pretty much, yeah.
And some of them that are looking to upsize and upscale in terms of some of their work too. So maybe working on a remake of a classic Fallout would be the perfect fit for them.
Yeah, if we got like a top-down turn-based like Wasteland RPG
Yeah.
in the Fallout universe, yeah, that could go off. Anyway, that has been the top 3 most important news stories from the week in games. We now pivot to our final segment. I'm so pumped to talk about this one. We're discussing all things PlayStation, their subscription services, and what a PlayStation Game Pass of sort could mean. This all stems from an article that surfaced just this past week around potentially Crunchyroll being rolled into PlayStation Plus as a new premium tier. We'll head on over to Video Games Chronicle, where Chris Scullion has this piece. He says PlayStation Plus may reportedly add a new premium tier, including Crunchyroll. Sony completed its acquisition of the anime service this week. It's according to a Eurogamer report, which claims there are plans to offer Crunchyroll as part of a more expensive PS Plus subscription. Sony announced in December 2020 that it was planning to acquire Crunchyroll for $1.175 billion. This acquisition was officially completed earlier this week, with Sony announcing in a press statement that Crunchyroll was now part of its Funimation global group company. Now it seems that Sony is considering offering Crunchyroll access to PlayStation Plus subscribers as part of a premium subscription. Crunchyroll is an anime streaming service which was originally founded in 2006 by a group of university graduates, and a bunch of other details that we won't dive into. But Paul, as a PlayStation fan yourself, you see this story. PlayStation Plus doing very well for Sony. Obviously, I think the number last week was 46 million, down by a million, from the previous quarter. But for all intents and purposes, still doing very well. And I will add, a number like that, 46 million at $60 per year, you're bringing in at least the same, if not a bit more, revenue wise that Xbox would be off of 18-20 million Game Pass subscribers. So a huge portion of PlayStation's business, and we know PlayStation a huge portion of Sony's business. So when you see this rumor, can you see it coming to fruition? And also, would you want it to come to fruition?
Yeah, I mean, a premium tier that is offering something else is cool, especially if it is kind of a different wing altogether. Like you're adding an anime streaming service in there. Like that's going to appeal to a certain crowd. Not me personally, but it's going to appeal to a certain group, and those people are willing to plunge the money in there. That's great. But that works in conjunction with PlayStation Now, not that we have it out here. That works with the PlayStation Plus collection. You've got these little pools of different areas. And I mean, obviously, we're linking a lot of this into is PlayStation going to go down the path of a Game Pass style equivalent? They have it already. It is the PlayStation Plus collection. It's not as vast, but a lot of that is driven by the position that both Xbox or Microsoft and Sony are in. Sony are the top dog. They have been for a long time. They don't need to pump these things down your throat. And they've also, though not to the same scale, they've started to build, especially through this PS4 generation, a prestige around their studios and any Sony first-party title where people just go run out and buy it just because it's a Sony first-party title. Whereas Xbox still needs to leverage Game Pass to get you in the door on a lot of these things. And I'm a good example of that. And this is not to discredit them or whatever, because I love the studio and I love the game. But Psychonauts 2, for example, like Game Pass is a tool to put that game in front of people. It wouldn't sell all that well otherwise, and that's just because it's kind of a quirky, indie-ish sort
off kilter.
It's not indie, but it's it's got that sort of thing. It doesn't have that mainstream sort of appeal. PlayStation doesn't need to do that with any of their titles. And this is anecdotal stuff that I hear just as a teacher in the class, and my students knowing that I'm the gamer teacher or whatever. They come up to me and they talk about games, and I've had students talk to me about, the name's just vanished on me. You're painting in the streets. It's the Sony first party title.
Concrete Genie.
Concrete Genie. Like I've had kids come and talk to me about that. Like, what? This
should. That's a game that should kids should be playing. These are the same
kids that talk to me about Call of Duty and that sort of thing. Like, what is going on here? And it's because they've gone, it's the new Sony game. Like, oh, you're getting a Nintendo thing starting to form here, like where a Nintendo fan just buys any Nintendo game, and we see that in the sales numbers of Mario Kart and Animal Crossing and all those sorts of things. Smash. A similar sort of thing is starting to emerge for PlayStation, lesser degree, but it's starting to build, and so they don't necessarily need to depend on a Game Pass style thing like that. Or what they do with the PlayStation Plus collection is they just can have a far more curated sort of thing. Like, here's 10, and obviously we're going to work with some of our partners and pick out some of the best, and that's enough for now. But they've set themselves up to change that model at any point. If they don't like how things are going, if they do start looking at the numbers and they see their lead is being eroded by Xbox, they might go, okay, let's add some games to it. But they still never need to go as deep as what Xbox does. And this cycles back to what we said about the first parties before, is because Xbox hasn't proven themselves there yet. So they've constantly got that to fall back on.
Yeah. Just back on the Crunchyroll point of things, I do like that Sony's looking at ways to add value to something like PlayStation Plus, right? Like they've already stated that, Jim Ryan is quoted last year saying that it doesn't make sense for us to be putting our first party studio developed titles that are costing in excess of $100 million per project into a subscription service. But they're still trying to find ways to bolster that value and obviously drive that subscription number up. And they're doing a fantastic job of it, this last quarter aside. But yeah, I wonder if I kind of look at this as like almost like a perk to being a PlayStation Plus subscriber, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how many people are going to jump on board for a premium tier, depending on how much that price goes up. So right now it's what, like $5 per month equivalent to be a PlayStation Plus subscriber, because it's what, $60 or $70 for the entire year. So if they double in value and say, hey, you also get access to all these anime shows via Crunchyroll and Funimation, is that going to be appealing? I'm not sure. I'm not that audience. Ryan in chat, who's hardcore PlayStation, says they can keep the animes, but so obviously it's not going to appeal to everyone. And animes, while getting popular, much more popular than it ever has been, is still quite niche to most of the market, I would say. So I kind of view this as like, hey, if this was a perk that went along with my subscription, much like in Game Pass, like, hey, get 30 days free access to Spotify or 30 days free access to Disney Plus, that's great. But I'm just I'm not sure that this is the right play for a gaming subscription.
Yeah, I mean, for that niche audience that you obviously mentioned, again, it's a niche within a niche, the anime, and then on specifically, being able to access it via PlayStation Plus. The way they could potentially do it, is whatever the subscription price is for Crunchyroll outside of the PlayStation ecosystem. If they turn around and say, you've already got PlayStation Plus, so you can get Crunchyroll for a reduced subscribe price, that's an appealing prospect. So maybe Crunchyroll, I don't know, sorry, but say Crunchyroll's going for $10, we'll offer it to you for $5 if you're already a PlayStation Plus member. That's a good strategy to do it. You're still making money there. You've got people doubling down on Plus and Crunchyroll. You're making more and more money there, and that's a potentially effective model that they could pursue. It all helps. There's no bad side to this. I think it's one thing propping up the other, and that's really good. Leveraging the PlayStation brand to help support your now ballooning anime sort of thing, which I still struggle to grapple with. That's Sony these days, but it is. So like that's smart business in the sense of using your biggest brand to support another. And again, we're seeing that with Xbox and Microsoft and what they're doing. It's the Windows that's helping support Xbox and that sort of thing. This is a far smaller scale, of course, but it's good business. And then obviously, it opens up the question about what does that mean for your Game Pass style equivalents.
Yeah. Let's pivot now more into, you just mentioned Game Pass, and obviously where we want to take this conversation is, PlayStation's answer to that. You've already noted that, PlayStation Plus is that answer. We saw Jim Ryan come out last year and say that you will hear that we have a response to Game Pass. Now, I suppose we'll find out sooner or later whether this Crunchyroll thing is true. But I think when community members within the gaming industry speak about that they want to hear Sony's answer to Game Pass, I think they want to hear a solution that is almost identical, right? They want to hear, how is Sony giving me access to PlayStation Studios titles for a subscription where I don't need to pay $70 or 125 Australian dollars a pop for each of these games. I will get to the next portion a bit, but I do want to get to chat before we get caught up in that discussion. Buddy says complicates it a bit, especially when Microsoft's Premium is a Game Pass bundle. For me, it highlights a weakness. If they could have a premium tier with Crunchyroll, could be, but if they just add it to PS Plus free though. So yeah, again, it's sort of that balance of just like, I understand that it's like a lot more value, right, to have Crunchyroll, and I'm not sure anyone would expect to get it as part of their existing PlayStation Plus service, but does it justify a new tier? Not sure. And then Ryan says the crossover between the Sony gaming audience and anime viewership is presumably high, so I can see the incentive. Having like a Prime Video sub model, use your PlayStation Plus as a Crunchyroll sub, best of both, potentially. Yeah, I kind of see that like there being, the Venn diagram of PlayStation Plus subscribers and Crunchyroll, being quite overlapped, right? And maybe you see Crunchyroll subscribers who aren't that into gaming see the fact that it's like, oh, my Crunchyroll subscription, to your point, if they come up with this model, Paul, is that, my Crunchyroll subscription could be halved essentially, if I am to get into gaming, or my avenue into gaming is now so much cheaper because Crunchyroll is a part of Sony. So the idea of picking up a PS5 and then only paying $60 for a year subscription. Look at me, I'm not a gamer, but all of a sudden I've got access to this PlayStation Plus collection, which has all the best first-party games from Sony from the last 5 or so years. So I can see the incentive there, as Ryan put it as well. But let's move now into the discussion around the Game Pass equivalent. You noted, Paul, very clearly that obviously PlayStation's coming from a market leader position. They don't need to come up with a Game Pass competitor at the moment because they're doing so well. They've already crossed 10 million consoles sold faster than any PlayStation hardware before it, so they're doing very well. We see the numbers for Returnal and Ratchet and Demon's Souls and Spider-Man. They're all doing fantastically, and we know that when Horizon and God of War arrive with their sequels, that they're going to explode as well. I think where a lot of people are seeing the trend going is that eventually Microsoft is going to be firing on all cylinders, and they're going to have big AAA blockbusters every 3 months at the very least. And is PlayStation going to keep up? Where I'm coming with this, where I'm coming from, pardon me, with this argument is that what I see, and probably this is influenced a lot by my experience on the publisher side of things, is that I'm seeing generations of kids and younger audience, millennials and Gen Z, growing up where subscription models are the way you access your entertainment, and the primary way you access your entertainment. And I can foresee a future in which, in 10 or so years, where that, like, the value of Game Pass is just going to be such a no-brainer that if you're not doing it, that you're going to be behind the curve, sorry. So that's kind of where I'm coming with this argument, saying, okay, I think PlayStation does need a Game Pass equivalent. Does it have to be $10 a month and you get immediate access to day one PlayStation Studios titles? I don't think so. But yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to start the discussion. Do you see where I'm coming from that perspective?
Yeah, no, I absolutely do. I mean, I for years have been kind of the physical copy, whether it's games or movies or whatever the case is. And now we've got Netflix. Now we've got Disney Plus. We've got KO. We've got all those sort of things to access all the things we might have accessed in more traditional models previously. And that's obviously extending to games, and we see it with Game Pass and the success there. And again, Apple Arcade, and a lot of the things that we've actually discussed tonight. You've structured a perfect show here in terms of just cycling. Everything feeds into this one topic perfectly. Congratulations. But PlayStation, I think right now, again, they you've said it we've both said it actually at this point. They are the market leader. They don't necessarily have their massive incentive to do anything right now. But what they're smart to do, and whether it's already there in the form of the PlayStation Plus collection or it's something else, they just need to set the pieces in place so that if Microsoft does build up that momentum and they are starting to churn out one game every quarter, that they can just flick that first domino and it all just starts rattling along and just shifts that tide. Like they can say, okay, here it is. Now you'll get your PS5 title. So here's the catalog. We'll add, and maybe it is just PlayStation Plus collection hypothetically. Here's all the big PS5 games so far. You've just got them all now. So there's Demon's Souls, there's Ratchet, there's everything. That's all added in there. Boom, done. Maybe they can find a way, probably unlikely because they just seem incapable of it, to get the PS3 games up there somehow. Break the back of the cell architecture. Probably not. But if they can just set all these pieces in place so that when it comes to that point of need and they need to flick the switch, and that status as the market leader no longer is winning the fight for them on its own, they can just go, boom, here it is. Then I think that's what I'd be looking to do. If I was kind of trying to imagine myself in that executive position right now, is I just need to have all the pieces ready so that I can clap back whenever I need to.
Yeah, no, and you mentioning also just like the positioning themselves, right? Like I think they have already started to do that in some small ways, because I would contest that Game Pass wouldn't exist if Microsoft didn't have all their first party games day and date on PC, and if they also weren't chasing the mobile market. Because to a point that Sean Layden raised in an interview, I think last year, was he was talking about how that the subscription model isn't sustainable. But he was coming from it as if you're only selling to the console market, where there are only 250 million consoles sold each generation. But if you open up your gaming offering to the PC market and also the mobile market via cloud gaming, or just any screen at that point, obviously, you get that 3 billion potential number that Phil rattles on about as well. So I don't think it's smart to hamstring a subscription to consoles, and you've started to see PlayStation do this with the acquisition of Nixus, and obviously porting more of their games to PC. They've said that putting their first party games on PC is going to form a greater part of their strategy moving forward. I think it's unlikely we'll see them day and date for the longest time. I think it's many years down the track, but I do think it'll happen. And to your point, I think once we are there, that's when they might be ready to say, hey, PlayStation games are on console, PC, and we also have our Gaikai PlayStation Now sort of pure cloud gaming service in the background, that we can bring all these disparate pieces together like Microsoft has done recently, and hit the go button. I'll get to a couple of comments.
It does feel like a in case of emergency break glass sort of option for them,
right?
They just have it there and ready to go.
And I think they've built up, to your point, they've built up that capital within the market, right, as the leader, to say that we don't have to move on this right away. We can sustain the business right now. And we're not under any immediate pressure to answer what Microsoft is doing, which I think is so very well played by them. I just want to quickly get to Ryan, who says I can watch the anime and get free games each month on PS Plus, or vice versa. For the right people, it could do the trick. Yeah, completely agree. Hello to Matt Brook in chat as well, who guested on this show a couple of weeks ago. You can find that episode about the Xbox One generation reviewed on my YouTube channel. I had a perfect segue out of this, and now I've forgotten it. Paul, we were just talking about...
I can keep rambling if you like.
Oh no, here's the thing. I think a lot of people, when they tackle this conversation around PlayStation's answer to Xbox Game Pass, is the fact that if PlayStation doesn't answer, it's like they fail or they die all of a sudden. And I think it's, at least for me, it's more about, I want them to remain competitive as the market shifts, right? And in my own head, I spoke about, generations and being accustomed to getting their entertainment from subscription. I just want them to be in a place, eventually where they can, to your point, answer back and still continue to be successful and offer these fantastic games that we've started to seeing. One point I want to get to, though, and this is the point I was thinking of, is that I'm not sure they would position themselves well enough if they don't get the costs of their games down. What are your thoughts on the rising cost, particularly of PlayStation first-party studios games?
Yeah, I guess
while I delete
PlayStation's
this
the one
comment in
that
chat,
stands out at the moment. PlayStation does stand out. Obviously, we know that 2K and others have kind of embraced that $70 US model as well, but the PlayStation ones are kind of standing out at the moment because there's been more of them at this point. Really, that's kind of I think the reason it's catching a lot of people's eyes, and people are starting to kind of frown on Sony. But really, you watch 2K22 is not far off, and whenever we start seeing more, there's other companies that are embracing it as well. Eventually that tide will shift and more will get there. The only one that won't will be Xbox, and that's because they're leveraging their focus is Game Pass, and that's how they're going to make their money from you. I don't have any massive issues with it. At the end of the day, the cost of making games goes up substantially with every generation. We've not seen price rises in a long time. Obviously, Australia tends to always somehow get hit, but that's the Australia tax as opposed to anything else. So I'm not massively opposed in a lot of senses. Obviously, there's inflation and those sort of things that have occurred over the journey as well, the value of the dollar, etc., etc., etc. So I'm not too massively opposed by that. To your point before, in 10 years, I think everything will be predominantly this kind of Game Pass style of model. So it is important, to the point from before, that they do get their dominoes stacked in the right way so that they can jump into that space as soon as they need to. But right now, they are the market leader. I spoke about that cachet with all their franchises and their studios before. Days Gone as the example, which, I mean, I like Days Gone, but the general reception is that it's not nearly as strong as a lot of other PlayStation titles, and it still sells incredibly well beyond what it probably should, and that's because it's a PlayStation title. So they can leverage that for quite some time. They can put out a Last of Us remake, sell 10 million copies, and laugh their way to the bank. And they'll do that then with new releases and all those sorts of things as well. They have no real incentive to do so, and their brand is what's doing that for them. So again, I think everything just boils down to just set the pieces up so that as soon as you need to, or that market shifts again, or Xbox really closes that gap, or whatever the case needs to be, as soon as you feel them breathing down your neck, you just smash that glass and off you go.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you're Disney Plus, right? And in the space of 2 years, you have more than 100 million subscribers to your service, just because the content is there. Like, you have this huge back catalog, and they expect quality from you, and you're probably going to deliver. And that's what we've seen Disney Plus do. It's done better than their expectations, actually, off the back of things like Mandalorian and all the Marvel TV shows as well. So yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. Quickly get back to chat. Ryan says Xbox created Game Pass due to their need for a more customer satisfaction. Sorry, it simply wouldn't exist if they were winning the previous generation. Would Sony have made it instead? Not a chance. And then he also says, with the argument around the ever-increasing cost of development, how is a subscription model able to support that cost on a long-term plan? The cost per person, allowing for overhead and licensing, etc., isn't really a whole lot. It is a stack of coin, but it can't be a viable system. Even Netflix isn't profiting on the model. They can't rely on Microsoft other divisions forever, can they? Yeah, we don't know that, obviously, that, what the current situation with Game Pass's financials are. I thought most people would guess that it isn't profitable. Phil Spencer has said, I think in an interview not too long ago, I want to say at the end of last year, that at least for the short term, that Game Pass is completely sustainable without raising the price, because there was concerns that they're just going to onboard as many people as possible and then double the price, and obviously probably lose a whole lot of people at that point, but that's how they're going to make their money back. We also see stories that we covered, I think last week when I had Pete on the show, where Game Pass seems to be, in some cases, doing the inverse, right? Where you see the Ascent going to Game Pass day one, but it's selling better than the publisher expected off the back of word of mouth. So you would assume that it would sell less because people can get it via subscription, but we still see games like Sea of Thieves pop into the Steam bestsellers charts, like, week after week. I'm trying to think of the other example that happened as well. But anyway, yeah.
We see lots of those examples, though. Games that are on Game Pass. I've just gone blank. The Square Enix game, we mentioned it early on.
Outriders.
The shooter, Outriders. The Game Pass aspect meant that obviously they made their money back immediately, but the game sold really, really well because that word of mouth that was built up within the Xbox community eventually was picked up by Steam players and PlayStation gamers, and they have no option but to buy it. So the sales are great. So it does work well in those instances. And obviously the Ascent's doing really well, but that's specifically the Steam audience, because everyone else, or the majority of everyone else, I should say, probably has Game Pass. And so they're not paying a cent outside of their monthly subscription.
Yeah.
So it works. How that kind of works long term when all of a sudden PlayStation has flicked the switch and they also have their own subscription model and that sort of thing, that could be interesting then, because the alternative looks very different. You don't have the option to just go and buy that one game that you want that's getting a lot of good word of mouth from the Xbox side. You can't just go and buy that. You have to subscribe to something to access it. So that's a whole other scenario that I think we'll have to analyze a little bit closer in probably 5 years, when, or potentially, whenever PlayStation ultimately flicks the switch.
Yeah.
Or Nintendo, God forbid, flicks the switch. Can you imagine?
Haven't they just got online multiplayer at this point? They're
still can't get it right.
Behind. They just added an Ethernet port to the Switch. The Dreamcast had that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, go figure.
But anyway, yeah, just on the viability thing, I also think about the differences in models between these different subscription services, particularly when we compare Game Pass to movie or TV show subscriptions like Netflix or what have you, is that like the model with Game Pass and like the beauty of, I suppose, the gaming market is that it's not a one and done, right? Like when you subscribe to Netflix, there is no business model outside of the subscription. But when you have something like Game Pass, you still have an a la carte market, right? Where you can go buy a different game from the developer whose game you just loved and played on Game Pass, or you can buy the DLC for the game that you just played in Game Pass, or the sequel. So like there have been countless times where I have fallen prey, but we all win in this situation where, like, for instance, Little Nightmares dropped into Games with Gold, which is, by all accounts, a terrible service at this point, earlier this year. And I had written off because I thought it was a horror game, right? And I don't like horror games. But my mate Scott convinced me. He's like, Shane, try it. It's now with Games with Gold. You have no excuse. I'm like, you know what? You're right, Scotty. I'm going to try it. And it's like a limbo, like puzzle platformer, creepy game. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. And immediately I got it for free via Games with Gold. But the second I got done, I bought the DLC. It was $8 on sale on the Xbox store, so I bought the DLC. I said, I'm going to get into this. I'll play it eventually, and then I will play the sequel. And I think, again, that's, to the point I was trying to make earlier, is that there is that model, right, where you're in with the subscription, but then there is still a chance for a publisher or a platform holder like Microsoft, or in the case of, Outriders, for instance, Square Enix, to get revenue on top of that subscription price. Yeah. So I think that's where you're going to see, and countless times I've been in the situation where, particularly like Forza Horizon 4, for instance, which obviously dropped day one in Game Pass, I was loving it so much that I just bought like the Top Gear DLC and the Lego stuff. I'm just like, you feel like you want to reward the developer also for giving you a great experience. So
you've also not had to fork out $100 in the first place. You're like,
exactly,
it's money that I haven't spent, and this stuff's kind of appealing. Why not?
Yeah. So I'm curious to see where all of this goes. Where I want to end this conversation, Paul, is a PlayStation Game Pass equivalent. What could it look like right now, realistically? And I would like to pitch you the idea that I've been thinking of as well, right? And you feel free to poke as many holes in it. You are Jim Ryan, and I've walked in an enthusiastic young PlayStation employee pitching you my big idea, and that is, okay, maybe it's a couple of years in the future, right? And we're starting to see PlayStation games getting closer to being date on PC. Maybe it's just like the second party games, like the PlayStation published stuff, right? But we're in that park where we're starting to get those interesting multiplayer games, and we're going to say, okay, we're going to backtrack on Jim Ryan's quote from last year, and we're putting all our PlayStation games into a PlayStation Game Pass, at least for the moment, on console, day and date, right? And we're going to have third-party games available as well, though the catalog won't nearly be as extensive as Xbox's, which at this point is like over 300 something. We're just going to hit that 100 to 150 mark. So, to Brian's point in chat, the licenses and the cost of those licenses won't be as, impactful to our bottom line. So we still get to boast about having a PlayStation Game Pass that gives you 100 plus high-quality games for one low monthly subscription, and you're also getting day one. But PlayStation Studios games are subject to like a Disney Plus Premier Access fee. So it's not free as part of your subscription, but maybe you pay $30 on top, or maybe $20, and that's equivalent of what, like 30, 40 Australian dollars on top to access it. And then 6-9 months later, that fee is lifted. And the reason why, people would point to that and say, well, clearly, you're going to enrage the community because it's not the same as Xbox, and they're offering you those experiences free of charge, no matter if they're first party or not. But my argument is PlayStation is already charging a premium for their first party games, and that they're 125 Australian dollars. So if you had a $10 per month PlayStation Game Pass subscription, wouldn't you be more willing to just pay 30, 40 Australian dollars more for Last of Us Part 3 or God of War Ragnarok, knowing that it is likely to be a premier PlayStation Studios title? It's sure as hell better than paying 125 Australian dollars, which would still be an option to you as well, right? This isn't the only way to access that. That's my pitch on how PlayStation can create a Game Pass competitor that still makes sense for them because, to the point we discussed earlier, costs for these games are just so damn high. Poke away, Paul?
No, I don't have that much to poke in. I mean, right now our PlayStation Plus cost is $70 Aussie dollars for the year. I mean, obviously it depends on whether you want to pay 6 months or annual or whatever the case is. 70, 80. I can't remember. Someone in the comments correct me. So if you're adding $30 to $40 on top of that, you're still only all up for the year paying the price of one new release. So that's undeniable value for a consumer, especially given that you're going to get more than one first party PlayStation title per year.
Yeah, but yeah, just to addendum, like it in my mind, it would be the exact same pricing model as Game Pass. So what $11 Australian
Okay,
per
right.
month. So you're paying what $132 a year, but you are getting that curated still 100 plus third party indie games as well on top of these first party games, and you have the fantastic back catalog of PlayStation first party to fill in the gaps as well. So yeah, to my point, it's not going to cost Sony nearly as much in license fees for all these third party and indie games. You can still curate something that is of great value, but you get your cake and you eat it too. The players get the day one access just at a much reduced price, but you still get to charge more or a premium on your first party content.
Yeah, I quite like the pitch, and Ryan's just jumped in saying $79.95 for the annual PlayStation Plus subscription. No, I like it in a lot of ways. Sorry, I don't have too many holes to poke in that.
Okay.
The thing that I guess
Jim?
fascinates me the most about how we'll get Jim on the line. You can talk to him. The thing that fascinates me the most about whatever PlayStation does when they enter that space is how much of the third party and indie content they actually, because we know what happens with Game Pass is they front up the money in advance. Here you've broken even, go from there. PlayStation or Sony specifically doesn't have that sort of Microsoft money to pony up. And obviously right now, and Xbox obviously does the same, and Nintendo does the same too, is they all make their cut on every sale that gets sold through their own platform. So my first thought is that any PlayStation equivalent's just not going to have as many games straight out the gate, and will never have as many games as Game Pass. And that's simply a financial thing, but also the fact that there is that, cycling back to what I said before, that perceived value that comes with the PlayStation first party title, and that is greater than the perceived value of an Xbox first party title. And again, that could change, and that would potentially inform what PlayStation does in the future. But they don't need to support it as heavily out the gate. They throw their first party titles up there, day one, if that's what they want to go with. Great. But they will not want to put as many third parties or indies into that service. There might be a few exceptions. I mean, obviously there's a huge crossover, cycling back to JRPGs again, but maybe you partner up with Square Enix on Final Fantasy 16, hypothetically, for example, because there's such an attachment to PlayStation and Square Enix Final Fantasy fans, and other key things as well. Maybe Crash, if Crash 5 came along, there's strategic ones you go with every now and then.
Definitely.
But the overwhelming majority is just, it's our first party, and that's more or less it, because they can make more money from their 30% cut of every sale afterwards. A game explodes. Was it Splitgate at the moment?
Yeah.
Is that the big shooter at the moment that's starting to pop through? I keep butchering the name.
Halo Cross Portal, yeah.
Like, a game does an equivalent to that, or it just explodes, and people are playing it everywhere. They stand to make more money from that 30% of every sale than they do from fronting up the money at the beginning of when it pops up on the PlayStation Plus collection or Game Pass equivalent or whatever. So there's a balance, like a sweet spot that looks very different for PlayStation than it does for Xbox, and that is all because of the first party. Everything boils back down to the first party suite of titles at the moment, and that balance will continue to evolve as Xbox, presumably, and I have faith in them, that balance will start to settle as Bethesda clicks into gear and Obsidian starts to put out their titles. And there's obviously going to be a few that won't work. That's natural. You've bought so many studios. There's going to be a few that won't work. Compulsion is the big red flag. You cited it before. Like, they're the one for me that I worry is just going to be the odd one out and might struggle. But the majority will thrive. And once that gets to that point, and they are putting these fantastic games out at a regular clip, PlayStation has to reassess the balancing act. And okay, what do we pull in? And they might have to do a few more, and it starts to evolve into a model that looks more like present day Game Pass. So that's going to continue to evolve. But again, it's an advantage that you have being the market leader, is that you can be a little more responsive, which is not necessarily like you want companies to be proactive and make these really great consumer first decisions and all that sort of thing. And it's nice to do that when you are chasing, like Xbox is, despite the fact that you are financially supported by the second wealthiest company in the world.
Yeah.
Like having that Microsoft dollar opens up so many opportunities for you that Sony, PlayStation's great. Sony's still a mega corporation, but there is a massive gulf between them and Microsoft. And so you can't just throw money at it like that. So
Yeah.
they will need to be more responsive just because of their bottom line.
One thing,
but finding that balance out to be interesting.
Yeah, last week, one thing Pete Burns and I noted was I think if any gamer should have one wish, it's that Microsoft is always in second place, because they're just going to fight harder than anyone can and will, and we as the consumer will benefit for it. I do quickly, before we wrap up, I do quickly want to touch on the fact that we see Sony already like coughing up what I assume would be a fair amount of dough for a lot of day one releases into PlayStation Plus, like the recent Oddworld game. We have Tribes of Midgard dropping as well, and even from there, second party, I guess, with it was Destruction All Stars, right, that landed into PlayStation Plus, which was originally meant to be a launch title at $70. So look, I think they're not afraid to to explore that. Let's create a subscription where games release into this service the day that they actually release. So most curious. But Paul, I think we're definitely in agreement here that they don't have to move right now, and I think they have the luxury, PlayStation that is, of being able to set the chessboard as slowly as they want to, in order to or to your point, I use dominoes for instance. Line up the dominoes,
knock them down
over the course of the next few years. So when they are forced to make that move, look, honestly, I would say here's hoping they are, right? Like, I want to see them be as competitive as Microsoft appears to be at this point in time, and fighting every moment to get your dollar as well. And it's not going to come at the detriment of any other platform holder. All three are thriving at the moment, and I just hope we continue to see that. Before we wrap up, one quick question that I had above that I wanted to get your thoughts on when we were discussing remakes, and that is Bluepoint. I would have guessed we would have seen an announcement by now. Is it still happening, do you think?
Look, I'm more anxious about the whole thing since it's now been, is it a month?
I think
since
it's been more than a month.
PlayStation Japan put that out there.
When it happened, I was saying next week you'll hear about it.
Yeah,
they're just spacing it out. Yeah.
And it might just now be a case of we stuffed up. We've already kind of told the world, so let's now just hold off and give them the opportunity for that second pop, because I mean Bluepoint won't have another game to show off right now.
Right. Yeah.
So of course, Ryan in the comments
chat, coming with a Metal Gear remake. I guess we'll find out soon. He's hoping that rumored PlayStation event is just around the corner.
Too.
Yeah.
But unless they've got anything to show soon, let's whether it's Metal Gear remake or who knows what. There's no rush on it, so given that it's out there, and you have to assume it's true. This is a legit PlayStation account. It wasn't, and they leak things all the time. PlayStation Access has a shocking habit of smaller scale things like PlayStation Plus games, but they stuff up and a regular enough clip that it doesn't totally surprise me that they might have just put up the wrong picture, especially when you've got a lot of disparate social media teams and all that sort of thing. That they've just, here's all the resources. This one's for this date and this one's for this date. They mixed it up. It was probably scheduled for the next week. Like I think you speculated, I speculated. I think a lot of people probably did. And they've gone, well, let's hold up. The world knows, so let's double dip. Let's do it when they've got the next game to announce, or when we hit a quiet patch again. Let's we don't have much to say. Let's just pull the trigger on it.
Yeah, the only sort of thing in my mind that nibbles back at me when I think about why it hasn't been announced recently is that Sony's a publicly traded company, and when they make big acquisitions like this, then they're obligated to share it with shareholders, right? So there are like laws in place about that thing. It's something that Xbox had noted as well when they're announcing Bethesda. It's like, once the deal was done, you can't sit on it. It has to be public information. So if it is done, then I'm wondering when do we hear about it?
Maybe the bottom line wasn't signed, and then they agreed to all terms. They hadn't signed on the bottom line. It leaked out there. let's just keep that paperwork. We'll just file it in the
Yeah,
filing cabinet here, and we'll bring it out in about 6 months, sign it, and then announce it to the world.
for all intents and purposes. Yeah, we'll wait when we need a win. We'll just pull it out
Yeah.
of our back pocket. Anyway, Paul, I could talk for hours with you on all things gaming, and particularly PlayStation. Thank you so much for joining me here. I hope you've had a great time.
No, I've had a blast. Thanks so much for having me on.
My pleasure. Tell the folks where they can find you and your fabulous work.
So, as we highlighted at the beginning of the show there, player2.net.au is where you can find me for all the written stuff, but also the links to all the various podcasts. So, Patched, as I mentioned before, is our weekly just conversational show about whatever might be going on in the business on any given day, week, month, whatever, including a little bit of talk about what we've been playing on a monthly basis. Dev Diary is the real baby, like I mentioned before. Every fortnight, its own podcast feed, so please subscribe, Dev Diary Podcast. And that's where I have game developers from all around the globe. They come in, they share their stories and experiences and the journey so far. We've had some really fascinating people come on the show in the past. Just yesterday, the latest episode went up. As we record this, just yesterday, the episode went up featuring John O'Peck, who local talent. A lot of people know him around here. Done some awesome work in the podcast and gaming space as well. But he's these days now a writer. He's written for Trigger Witch, New Zealand developer, Rainbite. They got him on board to write for Trigger Witch and did a fantastic job. The game's just recently came out, and he jumped on the show to talk about the whole journey up to that point. And it was nice to hear a few different things. I mean, got an established friendship with him outside of that space, but it was nice to still get surprised by a few things along the way. So it was a great conversation, and I'd encourage everyone to go check it out as well as the back catalogue.
Nice. Yeah, no, I can vouch for that show. It is fantastic. Every day I get out of the house, in this lockdown, and I walk to get my coffee and back. And Dev Diary is definitely in rotation. Fantastic. Paul James Games on Twitter as well. Be sure to follow him there. I've linked that in the chat. This has been the Question Box. Like I said at the top of the show, every Friday, 8:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, right here at twitch.tv/magic_cast. Please do follow us here. If you are curious to listen to past discussions, you can find all the VODs on my YouTube channel. Just search Magic Cast on YouTube. You can follow me at magic_cast on Twitter as well. So many handles, and so little brain power to remember them all. Thank you again to Paul James. Thank you for everyone who joined us in chat as well. We hope you've had a great time. And until next time, we will see you then.